Hi everyone, it's Anuradha, and we are doing part 3 or the final in the series of sourdough bread. Okay, so today we're going to do 3 things, and the first thing is we're going to just show or learn how to structure the dough and shape it, and that's specifically for you, Prema Manjari. And secondly, I'm going to show you how I get my dough ready to be scored, prepared to move from the proofing dish into my Dutch oven. And at this point I can show you a few ways of baking your bread if you don't have a Dutch oven. Dutch ovens are fairly reasonably priced, and they're a really nice investment, but I realize things might be a little bit difficult right now, and there are just a few different hacks for you to just make adjustments. So I'll show you a couple of hacks that I used personally when I first started learning how to make sourdough bread before I actually purchased my Dutch oven. At first, the whole process of making sourdough bread was so daunting to me. When my friend taught it to me, I was convinced that I was never going to make sourdough bread. It seemed like such a long and daunting process. But as soon as I started making it, it was really wonderful and easy, and it's been no trouble at all. So my Dutch oven, along with my Le Creuset pan, I am totally set. And if I need any more, then I can do these alternate methods, right? And then the last thing I will show you is how to use every bit of your starter, your discarded starter, to make something that I really love, which is like a little fried bread. I mean, it doesn't sound as oily as it isn't as oily as it sounds. So, okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna just show you. I prepared 2 breads or 2 dough batches yesterday, and I did not cover one very well, and I want to show you what it's like if you don't actually, in the bulk rising stage, if you don't cover it properly. So I shared this as one of my proofing bowls yesterday, but I'm not using it as a proofing bowl because I was asked to make some more sourdough. This is just considered to be the dish that I was doing the bulk rise in, so don't get distracted by the color of this particular bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this. And the way I collapse it is, if you can see that very well, that's really a beautiful bulk rise. So now I'm going to go ahead and get ready to do the structuring and the shaping. So if you notice, I'm doing that same method of kind of scraping and scooping. Scraping, scooping, folding. Scraping, scooping, folding. And if you can kind of try to stretch it, pull it up and then push it down, that's also really great. Okay, so this, like I said, imagine this is my proofing bowl. Okay, so then go ahead and I throw some flour down. Okay, and I love how this just kind of, there it is, wait for it, and look at that dough, that is gorgeous. Hello, Krishangi, thank you for joining. So sweet of you. So just lightly floured hands, okay? I go ahead and start creating some kind of structure to this dough. So I'm just kind of lifting it on the side, letting it stretch a little bit, and then folding it. And then I keep turning it. I try to go in a clockwise direction, but I end up always going counterclockwise. So as you can see by this process, it's getting tighter and tighter, and it's not kind of stretching too much. Hello, Lalita. Okay. And you can see by just this method, it is developing a beautiful little structure. If you have any questions, just go ahead and write your questions in the comments. Okay. And then I'm doing this now because I'm just kind of tucking the seams in. Okay, so what does that look like? Can I get some thumbs up or anything like that? Okay, so this is now something, it's just gonna rest for a few minutes. Okay, so yeah, I would say for about 5 or 10 minutes. Now, if this is, after this has rested, what I'm gonna do after this is actually put it into the shaping bowl, which is my banneton. And my banneton is being used right now to shape my, my dough that is ready to be baked right now. So at this point, I let it sit for about 5 minutes to kind of get structure a little bit, okay? So assuming 5 minutes has passed, I go back and do another little structure assistance here. Same method, just kind of lift and fold, lift and fold, lift and fold. And as you can see, these seams are developing here. Okay, you don't have to use a lot of flour. You just want to use some flour for your fingertips. Okay, and then the same method. It's really important to let about 5 minutes pass over here. So at this point, I'm gonna go back to this bowl. Now this would have been a clean bowl for you, all right? Now because like I said, I use this to proof, it's not a clean bowl, but I'm not really so worried about that. And then go ahead and get a piece of cloth like this. And what I do is I put one side of it into the bowl like this. Just messing with the dough here. And then kind of generously spread that with some flour. I also like to use a little bit of cornmeal at the bottom. That really just gives it a nice look. Okay. And then one of my favorite things to do is right before I put it into the shaping bowl is that I just throw in some sesame seeds and I just kind of roll it in sesame seeds like this. And then catch it. And the seams are going to be at the top. You see how the seam is at the top? Pinch it a little bit. Okay. A little bit of cornmeal on the top. This is to prevent it from sticking to the fabric. And then I've seen sometimes people just go ahead and put some more flour at the edges, but I don't find that it's necessary to do that. And then go ahead and cover this. And then this actually goes into the fridge in order to kind of develop the structure, tighten the structure, and then slowly let it rise. Yeah, so I'm just going to put this aside and bring back my hello Janet Cleaver. Nice to see you. Welcome. Now this is the dough that I have already done that two process of kind of structuring, you know, lifting, folding, and I put this into my proofing basket, which is this gorgeous basket here. It's called a banneton. And I let it sit in the fridge all night, okay? And as you can see, it has a beautiful curved kind of surface to the end. It's a little springy, a little bit of an indentation. That's one of the good tips of making, a tip for making good sourdough bread. If you just press it in, it kind of springs back up, but you see a little indentation, which means that it hasn't overproofed to anything like that, all right? Now we are ready for getting it ready to put into the oven. I'm just going to kind of talk you through this a little bit because for some reason this particular part really kind of stresses me out because it's very quick and you know, I have to remember to not touch the hot Dutch oven. I have to get my gloves on. I have to, yes, it's just a bunch of, you know, it's just a few kind of safety steps. So I get a little bit nervous. So I don't want to be talking too much or feeling like I'm missing out on telling you something. So very importantly, before you get your bread into the oven, you have to properly heat your oven. It has to be absolutely beautifully hot. Sourdough bread requires a really hot oven. And depending on the oven that you have, you might even have to heat your oven to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I heat my oven at 475 degrees Fahrenheit. My oven runs fairly hot, but not as hot as a really good convection oven. And I heat my oven for about 45 minutes to an hour. That's just how serious I am about capturing all of that hot, warm, you know, very, very hot air in the oven. Not only that, once my oven reaches 475, I put in my Dutch oven so that my Dutch oven with the lid is also heating up. Because sourdough, this particular method of sourdough requires a steam to be created, and it also requires for that steam to force the bread into a quick rise for the first 20 minutes of baking, and then you remove the lid and let it bake completely without kind of over browning the top or the bottom. So that's really important, is that you have a very hot oven, and you have a pre-warmed Dutch oven. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this technique, show it to you. You might not, I'm going to try to talk a little bit through it, and then afterwards I will show you some alternatives if you don't have any, if you don't have a Dutch oven. So Janet Cleaver is asking, what kind of flour do you use? This particular flour is a freshly ground spelt flour. I tend to use a lot of spelt flour because it's just more digestible. I love it because it's more of a heritage grain. And also my neighbor, Jay Morari, he only eats spelt. He doesn't eat wheat. So whenever I make bread, I usually share half my loaf with him, and he really is appreciative. So that's one of the reasons I started using spelt, in addition to it being a heritage grain and more digestible. I've also used einkorn, which is wonderful, very expensive, very delicious. And on some occasions I have used whole wheat. However, today I am proofing right now a completely white sourdough loaf. Okay, so we have this, and very important is we need to have what's called a lame. And instead of a lame, which is the tool that you use to score the bread, I just go ahead and use a blaze. And I see that in my attempting to be very organized today, I see that I don't know where my blade is. It's okay. We're going to use a new blade here. This, you have to be really careful with the blade. So Janet, yeah, okay, organic spelt, Amazon. I actually just get the organic spelt berries from Frankfurt Farms, and I get a big bag of that, and whenever I'm ready, I just go ahead and grind it. But I do know that it's fairly expensive. There is an Amish farm that's just I think it's 2 hours away from here, and they have really good prices for spelt flour. So what I try to do with this is I try to create a little sheath here. Otherwise, I have actually cut myself with this blade. So this is to score, yeah? Okay. Oh yeah, also before you, and this is something I think Govinda Priya asked about, so you go ahead and cut your parchment paper. I tend to just use like parchment paper that I've used before. This was my donuts that became sourdough breakfast rolls. I tend to just use this size, the exact size of the Dutch oven, but that's because I kind of can really, you know, manipulate it really nicely. But I would suggest that when you're starting off with your sourdough, that you use a slightly bigger bigger than your Dutch oven so that you have space to kind of hold it, you know, and manipulate it. Then I tend to use this, which is just a plain steel block that's part of a pie. And this becomes my holder for my parchment paper, and I'll show you what I have to do. I use this when I have to flip over the dough into this, and then from here I put it into the Dutch oven. Okay, I hope I'm being really clear. Just stop me and ask me any questions if you need any help. I'm just kind of trying to navigate this whole kitchen setup and, you know, the camera setup, etc. The other alternative is to just use a small baking tray, and I'll explain. I'll just use the baking tray because I'm sure many of you have baking trays like this. All right. Okay, so do we have everything? So check really quickly, because this is actually really good. You want to check that you have everything ready, because you don't want your pan to be sitting out too long. You don't want to be handling your dough too much. You want to kind of do everything really quickly. Okay. So what I do first is I want to topple my dough over. So let's go ahead. We don't have a Dutch oven. Yeah. I'm going to show you how things to use if you don't have a Dutch oven in just a little bit. Okay, can you see that very carefully? I think you can. Okay, so I went ahead, placed my parchment paper over my bowl, and then place this here, this cookie sheet. Try to make sure that you have enough space on either side with your parchment paper, right? Because you're gonna be moving it around. Go ahead and cover that, and then just turn the bowl over. Okay, and then slowly voila. Look at that, everyone. That's gorgeous, isn't it? Can you see it? Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna score it. Scoring it means I'm just gonna put just gonna make a little design here. All right, and okay, so then I'm getting out you can see it's such a live dough. It's starting to spread out. I don't want it to spread out too much. So boom, boom, get out go ahead and bring this out. If I can turn this. Make sure that you are holding this. This is so hot. Get that out. Take your gloves out and then catch this. Throw that in. Put your glove back on. Capture that steam. Put both gloves back on. Open your oven and be careful that the heat doesn't go all the way into your face. Phew! My goodness. And that's how you get your bread in. Thank you. That was beautiful, wasn't it? I mean, I'm serious. This part totally stresses me out. So, phew. That's done. So you got it, right? Parchment paper. This, kind of topple it over. That part about scoring, I would suggest you just go one score down, one score across, try to get it into the oven and try to put it in. Please, 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 please. This is just the most important part. Do not get distracted with that particular part. You are just not going to be happy at all. Okay, so a really fun part is once you become very adept, and I was going to do one of these, but I completely forgot. Like I said, that particular part really stresses me out, especially since I'm on camera, is that I really got into these cool stencils. And whenever I'm doing it as a gift for someone, or making it for a special occasion, I tend to use these stencils, and they're really, really fun. You just go ahead and quickly place it on the bread, and what I do is that I use a little strainer like this, a sieve, and I just throw in some flour, and I kind of sift it, shake it over the stencil, and just pick up the stencil, and it's really beautiful. And you just have to kind of score around it so that the shape of the stencil remains. So those are stencils for you when you get really good at your bread making. Okay, so then the second step. So it's at 475. Just 1 second. Alexa, set the timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, starting now.
She's my assistant. So after 20 minutes, I'm going to reduce the temperature. I'm going to reduce the temperature to 425. Usually I would only reduce it by 25, but I actually hiked it up a lot today because I was using a different kind of flour. All right. Okay, so in case you don't have a Dutch oven, this is what you can use. You could use a cast iron frying pan, or what is a skillet, or I call this a tawa in Indian style, and a bowl over it like this. Okay, so this, of course, you have to use a decent quality stainless steel bowl. It might warp a little bit, but nothing bad's going to happen to it. So this does really well. It doesn't hold the heat as much as I would want it to hold the heat, but it's fairly good, and I would still use the parchment paper at the bottom, right? And what I would do to create extra steam is that I would possibly keep this in to heat, and then only put this in once I get the bread on top of it, and then put in maybe a bowl of water or a baking tray at the very bottom, and then just kind of as soon as I put my bread in, I would just throw a whole cup of water into the baking tray that is at the very bottom to create kind of like a splash of steam. The second thing you can do is you can use a pizza tray. And thanks to my friend Vrishni who gave me that pizza tray, the same principle over here. You would use a parchment paper and then cover it. Now, the cool thing about this is that I've seen where people have just also, if there's enough space, like if you have a really big bowl, a bowl that covers a good part of it, you can throw a few ice cubes in, and that creates immediate steam on the inside. That's really fabulous. So you could throw a couple of ice cubes inside, in addition to doing the method of putting water into an already heated baking pan at the bottom. Okay, so those are two really good methods. And of course you can, who's that? Virya! Oh my goodness, welcome. Yes, that's the Dutch oven? Yes, okay, so this becomes the Dutch oven. The Dutch oven is actually what I have already put into my, Dutch oven just really means that it's very, very tight, solid, it's hard. And what I also use is a really good stoneware pan, like this, very, very hard. You can hear that sound, right? It's really beautiful. So I generally make 2 loaves of bread, and that's the second one that I use. Originally that was just my cooking pan. I mean, I would use it to cook everything in it, and now it's just become primarily my sourdough bread making pan. Okay, so I think I have explained the 2 methods that I wanted to with you. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on, the stove on. And so very quickly, just a few little points about cooking the sourdough bread. Okay, so point number 1, invest the time in heating your oven. It has to be really hot. That's why the professional sourdough breads taste so fantastic. It's because they have really great ovens that, have kind of like air locks and locks, etc. So, sometimes I might just want to stand here and keep my oven shut really well. No, I don't do that. I just really heat it up very, very hot. The second thing would be to make sure that you do that little kind of dent, indentation test, so that you just, it kind of springs back, but it leaves a little bit of indentation, the sourdough. Plan your time with your sourdough. You don't want your sourdough dough to overproof, right? So if it overproofs, it's just going to kind of collapse when it starts to bake. It's not going to have that airiness to, actually grow and become really light and fluffy. So very important is that you really have to trust the science of the sourdough. Read up about it, read my notes on it, and kind of follow those timings. If you're going to be away for a long time and you've already gotten to a certain point in your sourdough, then you might as well just keep it in the fridge and really, really slow down the fermentation process. So you have to find a really nice routine for yourself. I have a reference which I can try to find if you need a reference of, for example, if you have like a working schedule, or if you want to start your sourdough to have it ready to be baked in the morning. I can give you a schedule for that, of when to start and what to do with your particular dough. So yeah, sourdough is not something you speculate with. So just go ahead and follow those measurements. There's a whole science behind it. And once you become really adept, you can kind of change things around, especially with the hydration. You can actually increase the hydration and really go towards that really kind of soft and light bread. I'm very excited about tomorrow's bread because I haven't done, white flour for, I can't remember, So I'm looking forward to this very comforting white bread. I'm probably going to put like tons of sauerkraut, in it, and really kind of digestive stuff. But sourdough in itself is so rewarding. It's so, naturally enzymatic. It's just so digestible. All right. Okay. So then I was just trying to kill some time there with the talking, and since no questions are really coming up, I just wanted my pan to get very, very hot. And I'll show you what I do with my discarded sourdough starter. Now this means that, the sourdough starter that I've sent you, my hope is that you're going to get it really healthy, you're going to get it acclimated to your own wild yeast and bacteria in your particular area and your house. So go ahead and feed it, as often as you can. And then every time you feed it, you have to discard half of it. So what I do is that I save half of it. And yesterday, over the last couple of days that I've been making these videos, I have come up with this much of discarded starter. That's because I was just baking so much, So, but the cool thing about this is that I never like to waste my starter. So you can use your starter in all kinds of stuff. I just read a recipe where someone throws their discarded sourdough starter into banana bread. Of course, in addition, they use, baking soda, baking powder, etc. But then, for me, what's really wonderful is to know like there's this, fresh live cultures in the banana bread, pancakes, waffles, crackers, pizza dough. You plan your menu around how often you're feeding your sourdough starter, and when you're going to have a good amount of sourdough starter, then you can actually plan to make a sourdough waffle breakfast or pancake breakfast. Or so what I'm going to do is show you what I love doing. It's fried bread. It's a real treat. I'm going to try to show you the pan here. I'm just using a non-stick pan. It's a really good pan. It's called a scan pan. So it's not like your regular Teflon, with all that kind of funky stuff. So I go ahead and, put some, I'm just using ghee here. I love ghee. And I just go ahead and just pour my sourdough starter in here. How crazy is that? So my pan is about a medium pan. And this is my discarded stuff. So I'm just going to use as much of it as possible. Okay. Just going to press it a little bit down. Usually this is Usually this is a lot more liquidy, but it's not that way today. And so it comes out into a nice round roti or flatbread. Right, so there it is. Fried sourdough flatbread. This is so good. Never gonna. You probably don't really. It doesn't look that good at the moment. Trust me. This is so good. Okay, and then what I do here is just hike it up to about medium temperature. It's already cooking really nicely. Any questions? Okay, no questions just yet. And then what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of za'atar in. And za'atar is just sesame seeds. I like to use black sesame seeds, and it has a bunch of spices in it, like some green spices, some cumin, roasted cumin, of course. Yeah, and then I'm gonna let it cook. Somehow my scan pan doesn't get as hot as a regular pan. It takes a while to get really hot, but the results with my scan pan is really quite incredible. I'm going to try to show you what the bottom is going to look like. It's not quite ready. Not quite ready. I'm just going to hike it up a little bit. Yeah, anyway, I don't expect for it to be ready for this particular video, but we'll just let it get going. And then my plan was to use some of my microgreens that I'm growing, some radish microgreens. I was just going to throw that on the top and use some balsamic glaze for it. Oh yeah, very important. When your sourdough is finished, you have to let it cool completely before you cut it, because what happens is that when you cut it, when it's hot, it's very likely that the gluten strands on the inside are still very warm, and as you're cutting, you could pull out an entire, chunk of gluten strands. So the sourdough, really, the gluten, everything has to cool completely in order for you to have a very smooth cut, okay? You're also going for crusty as well. So one of the tricks for crusty is that you start with a high temperature, covered, and that forces the entire it forces the dough and the steam that's trapped in the Dutch oven forces the dough to actually rise up and hit against the crust. Okay, so then once that happens, you have to remove the lid, because you kind of want the steam to escape from the Dutch oven and allow for the cooking process, the slow cooking process, to happen. Okay, does that make sense? So Veria, you're asking, what's the importance of putting the bread into the Dutch oven? Yeah, so the Dutch oven creates an incubation of steam for the sourdough bread and allows for that beautiful crustiness to happen, and that and it maintains that kind of moist but dense feeling on the inside. When you cook bread without a cover, without steam, it's fairly soft bread, soft, like the way you would get from the store, like a loaf of bread. So the whole concept of this kind of crusty, crackly, burnished, sourdough comes from this method. So I can see that this is beautiful. I'm just gonna go ahead and show this to you. Veria, I'm not sure if you were here when we were speaking about the alternate ways of using a Dutch oven, like makeshift Dutch oven, but go ahead or I could send you a message about that, and you can just use like a cast iron pan or a pizza. You probably have a pizza stone and a cover. So let me show you this gorgeous sourdough starter, discarded starter, and I am gonna turn it over. Look at that, people. Look at that. Is that gorgeous, or is that gorgeous? Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna put it back on. great. I'm gonna go ahead and put some of these radish greens and some balsamic reduction and slice it up, offer it to Giri Raj, and then we can enjoy it. But I'll make sure that I take a picture. I'm sure it's gonna be very airy and kind of light and fluffy on the inside. So as you can see, I didn't really use a lot of oil in that. It was just really to coat it, and you can do whatever you want with it. When you open the lid and you continue baking your sourdough, you just have to follow the instructions I gave to you. What I like to do is that I like to lift the whole Dutch oven and put it on a cookie tray or a pizza stone. Like I said, you don't have to do that, but what that does is that it slows down the cooking at the bottom, and so my bottom doesn't become browner than the top. And it's just one little extra step to make sure that the bottom doesn't get too brown. Some people have complained about the bottom becoming too brown. So that's just like a little extra tip. All right, so if there aren't any more questions, I am so excited to have been able to go through this process with you. Thank you all for joining. My husband went ahead and he uploaded both yesterday and the day before's video on my YouTube channel called Healing the Heart with Anuradha, and I'm going to be trying to make more of these videos. I just have loved going live on Facebook and kind of interacting with you guys. It's felt really wonderful in this isolation, this pandemic isolation, to feel connected to some of you. And I want to share more of my other recipes with you. With that, please subscribe to the YouTube channel called Healing the Heart with Anuradha, and click on notifications to follow this particular Facebook page, Healing the Heart with Anuradha. And I'll be posting pictures as well on my Instagram, which is also @with Anuradha or Healing the Heart with Anuradha. So thank you so much for going on this healing sourdough journey with me, and I look forward to seeing you again. And thank you so much for just being a fabulous community. Take care.